I grew up on a quiet, shady street in a Chicago suburb. I've always dreamt about recreating my childhood experiences in Minecraft. Welcome to Cedar Circle. Alright, I have finished Jeff's house and the two immediate neighbors, the McDonald's and the Mahers. As you can see, those houses are fairly flat and not a ton of detail. And as I mentioned, Jeff's house is probably the most detailed thing, the most ornate and lovely house that I remember from my childhood. So I used it as kind of the scale for the rest of this build. So let's take a quick look. In the driveway, we have an RV camper that was pulled behind a van, and we used to spend many summer nights camping in that RV camper. We've got the oak tree in the front yard, the bird bath I used to knock over all the time, and bushes that Jeff and I made winter forts between the bushes and the wall, and kept comic books there overnight, and they froze and turned to slush. We've got a bush that we used to hide underneath sometimes, and we'd peek in through this window and see what his dad was doing on the computer. I'm going to go around this way, give you the outside tour first, because this gate right here, past the rose bushes and the sort of spruce bushes, was like entering into a fairy tale world for me as a kid. You would pass the birch tree, and all along this side were railroad ties, which are big chunks of wood, and rose bushes, and again, these like pine bushes. I don't know what they're called, but it basically enclosed the yard so that you're only seeing what's in this yard. The rest of the world just completely melts away, and you're in a fantastic world. There's a little window down into the basement. There's a creepy little dark space underneath this wooden ramp that goes up the side of the house. And the ramp goes out to a deck, which we'll look at in a minute. And down here was a bunch of rocks or gravel. And around this way was gravel around the pool. There's a pool here. The back fence was wood with a big giant fence gate with big giant creaky hinges that would creak every time you came out here to the field. And this field is, and this hill and this play area back here is where my friends and I did so much of our adventuring and growing up as kids, rivaled only by Jeff's backyard. In the back of his backyard, he had this aluminum shed, and it was kind of a reddish, corrugated, stained shed with a upside down boat on the roof. And then behind it was like a storage for wooden planks and all kinds of metal, and there were barrels along the side full of pieces of lead and copper and just all kinds of stuff that his dad used to salvage from who knows where. Basically a mini junkyard. There was the pool filter with its chlorine tablets that if you smelled them too close, you could actually make yourself ill. And then there was the deck itself, which was just the most amazing deck we'd ever seen, with multiple layers of decking. We used to hang our beach towels over the edge of the railings. His dad built a wooden slide down into the pool that he covered with like aluminum siding or something, so you could, and there was a hose with water going down so you could slide down into the pool and splash down. There was a wood pile. We used to play hide and seek, and I would hang over here on the back of the fence, and I would duck down behind the wood pile, and kids would run by and not see me. And if they did see me, I always had a quick escape by jumping the fence into the other yard. Yep, I was pretty darn crazy. They had a really cool porch swing. The back of their house was an addition. That's why it's got this pretty extended back compared to the neighbors' houses. But the way that I think I most enjoyed entering the house was through the basement door. Now, as I mentioned, this was a sliding glass door. As I mentioned, they had an addition. So this back part here is like a second house added on to the first house. And this basement, at least when I was young, was not finished, but there was again a lot of storage, old bicycles, picnic tables, just all kinds of wood and random stuff. And then another sliding glass door and windows here. This was the original back of their house. And then right when you walked in, on the left was the clothes washer and the clothes dryer, sort of with a bunch of hangers here on a rod, and then shelving. And given that every block in Minecraft is 3 feet by 3 feet, it's impossible to get to some of the level of detail. But I feel like I've done a pretty great job, just bringing back memories at every step of the way. Okay, so this was kind of like a little family room down in the basement. There was a couch along the back, and all along the sides was wood paneling to kind of cover up the bare stone walls and things like that. Right here, Jeff's mom had a big giant pile of stuffing. She was always into arts and crafts, and I think they probably went to some sort of flea market and bought bags and bags and bags of stuffing. The pile was enormously high for making like pillows and stuff. And then Jeff's dad down here had a TV with a whole shelf and shelves over this way full of pirated VHS tapes, beta machines, VHS machines. Just, again, just like he scavenged stuff around the outside by the shed, he collected all kind of electronic gear. And you could actually slide these wooden panels back and forth, and there was additional storage back there. And one of the kind of secrets that we found when we were kids was his dad's stash of fireworks hidden behind the wooden panels behind the couch. Then there was his dad's workshop, which we almost never went in because it was quite crowded and quite dirty. There was sawdust all over the floor. But he had his workbench and tools, and he had like saws and pressing things and all kinds of machinery. And then this back part of the room was where the water heater and the furnace were. And when you were young enough, you could actually squeeze between them and slide these panels out of the way. Whoops. And you could actually get into the other room and go back and forth. So one of the things I loved the most about Jeff's house was just the pure amount of places and things that you could hide in or behind or around. You could climb over and hide back in here. But this room right here is where we spent many, many, many hours avoiding the hot summer sun or the ice cold winters. And this is where the computer was. So Jeff was the first person on our block to have a computer. And just like his dad had stacks and stacks of VHS tapes, he had stacks and stacks and stacks of discs of all kinds of games, every game you could think of. He would come home from work and hand us a shoebox full of discs and say, hey, try these games out. Tell us which ones you think are good. There's the window that we used to peek in, and if you were at just the right angle, you could see through this window, and you could actually see past this doorway here all the way to the TV, and see whatever his dad was watching down in the basement. And again, you could slide the wooden panels aside, and you could hide back in here. Just lots and lots of places for hide and seek at Jeff's house. We spent many, 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 many hours here. Now, the addition was actually built later. It wasn't part of the original house, and a lot of my childhood memories are before the addition. But the addition and the pool and the deck are kind of my like early teen memories. So this build is actually sort of a blend of those things. They had a giant like sandstone brick kind of fireplace with shelves on either side, and a TV here that we used to sit and watch TV. Bathroom. This was actually a second dining room, a really nice big dining room. Again, sliding glass doors out to the patio, and side entrance to this ramp right here. So again, if you're playing hide and seek tag inside and outside the house, there's lots of doors and lots of paths you can take. And then coming over to here, there's actually a kitchen table right here that I couldn't fit between here given the Minecraft scale, but that's all right. The kitchen with the stove, and actually the fridge is supposed to be here, but again, not enough room. And then they had the first island in their kitchen that I ever was exposed to, where you could sit back here on a stool at the island, and the phone would be here on the wall, and you just kind of felt like you're someone important sitting at a desk in an office somewhere. And then the family room. Now here's where my mind kind of goes back to a very young age, where again they had a large set of shelves, and the first TV in our neighborhood with an Atari 2600 and VCR, where we used to sit up here and play Atari. This is a kind of representation of the piano that his mom taught me how to play piano on. And then his sister's room, his mom and dad's room, bathroom, and then what I could fit of Jeff's room. And the one feature I chose was his bunk beds when we were very, very young, before he got a water bed and, before we all grew up. But this is kind of my best attempt at representing his house. And as I said, I kind of used it to set the scale for the neighborhood and really make sure that all of the other houses on the block would fit and be a fairly consistent scale. I'm going to go ahead and make the rest of these built up just flat like this, not as ornate. I don't have very strong memories of a lot of trees on this side of the street, except in their yard. But I do have a lot of memories of trees on my side of the street, and then my house is going to be here. So I'm probably going to start my house next. I might actually build part of this area through here, or this area through here. I'm not exactly sure what I'll build yet. It kind of depends on what story I feel like telling you guys, but for all intents and purposes, Jeff, that's your house in Minecraft, man. That's where we grew up. It's amazing. It's amazing. I often find it funny that as I'm editing videos, I notice details about the world, about things that I need to change. And in this case, I thought about some additional stories that occurred over probably, 13 years of playing around back here. This, behind this shed here, actually, when we were, in high school, we used to play a lot of role-playing games. We played a lot of role-playing games down in the basement at a folding card table. We played a lot of role-playing games in his dad's van. And at one point in time, we actually cleared a little bit of this area, and we built a fort out of wood that his dad had laying around back here. It had a ceiling, it had a floor, it had side walls, obviously. We used this wall of the big giant thick wooden fence as one, and we used the metal walls another. And we built a fort back here that we sometimes played role-playing games in. Pen and paper, dice, kind of role-playing games. I missed a tree. I knew this looked a little bit blank along here. There should be a crabapple tree. Now, I kind of want to use this because it is an actual tree trunk, but it's 3 feet across, and the tree trunk was definitely not 3 feet across. It was a smaller tree. It wasn't this thin like a sapling, but it was more like it was more like this than not. And this is the part where Minecraft gets a little bit difficult because anything that you place is going to be right up against other blocks. I don't want to block the sidewalk, but I think that will do for the crabapple tree. And there were little baby, what we called crab apples, that hung off this tree like cherries, but they were hard, and you definitely wouldn't want to eat them. They were small, and we used to take them, handfuls of them, and get on either side of the yard and have crabapple fights where we would like approach each other and throw them at each other. And in these bushes, along these bushes here, this used to be Endor for our Star Wars action figures back in the late 70s, early 80s. And over here, we used to also play with Star Wars figures around this. Because again, this was like the perfect little fairy tale world, all closed off from the rest of the world. And it was like our own little planet. And I just thought of another thing that I need to do. Put some block data in here. Custom name bird bath. So I've been trying to add as much detail as I can all throughout the map. And like I said before, what I'm going to do is in my house, it'll be detailed, in Jeff's house. But then the rest of the neighborhood is going to be fairly plain for now anyway. And the details of where I spent most of my time back up and through here will be very detailed. This path will be very detailed. And some of the sections of path where I maybe rode my bike around the trail, but I didn't spend a lot of time there, will just be sort of hazy, more vague memories. And then, you know, possibly streets where I didn't even really go very often. Those may or may not ever get built in this map. We'll see. Maybe I'll just make glass houses, so they're sort of like ghosts of houses. That could be an artistic touch.